Welcome back to the deep dive where we take a whole stack of research and kind of boil down to the stuff you actually need to know.
That's right.
So today we are diving into the world of computer-aided text analysis,
Ooh, fun.
CATA.
Yeah.
And this one is, it's got some real aha moments.
It really
And
does.
so we've got some fascinating research here from Guinness and colleagues.
Mhm.
And it's all about whether we can really trust CATA to give us accurate insights.
Right.
Especially when it's being used, increasingly to measure these really complex things like a company's entrepreneurial spirit or how market-focused they are.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting about CATA is that it's really changing the game in research.
Yeah.
Because instead of relying on things like surveys or interviews,
Right.
which can be, very time-consuming and expensive,
Yeah.
it uses existing texts like CEO letters or social media posts to measure things.
Wow.
And this allows researchers to analyze massive amounts of data that would be literally impossible to process manually.
It's like having a superpowered magnifying glass for language.
It is.
But here's the catch.
Uh-oh.
How do we know if those word counts that CATA relies on
Right.
are actually giving us an accurate picture?
Yeah, that's the big question.
That's where measurement error comes in.
Yes.
And this research highlights just how big of a deal it can be.
Huge.
I mean, the study actually found that in some cases, CATA results were underestimated by a whopping 100%
100%.
due to measurement error.
Wow.
Imagine thinking a factor has little to no effect
Right.
when in reality,
Yeah.
it's a major driver.
It's huge.
That's the kind of risk we're talking about.
That's the risk.
100%.
That's a massive difference.
So what exactly causes this measurement error in CATA?
Well,
I know the research digs into a few different types.
yeah, they break it down into three main culprits.
Okay.
Transient error,
Mm-hmm.
specific factor error,
Okay.
and algorithm error.
All right, so let's start with transient error,
Okay.
which basically means that things change over time.
Right.
And that can affect the words people use.
Exactly. So let's say, for example, a
Yeah.
CEO is really focused on innovation one year
Okay.
because they're launching a new product.
Mm-hmm.
But the next year, their focus shifts to something else.
Right.
Efficiency.
Makes sense.
Their word choices would change,
Right.
even if their company's overall level of innovativeness remained the same.
Right. So if we were analyzing their letters from those 2 years,
Exactly.
we might get a distorted view.
Yeah.
Not because the company changed,
Right.
but because the language used to describe it did.
Exactly.
And that's transient error in a nutshell.
That's it.
So how do researchers account for these shifts in language over time?
Well,
I mean, you can't just ignore the fact that word usage evolves.
right. That's where careful dictionary selection comes in.
Okay.
Researchers have to be incredibly thorough in choosing the words they use to represent a concept, making sure to capture all the nuances and potential variations in language over time.
So going back to our innovation example,
Yeah.
it's not just about throwing in every synonym for innovation,
Right.
but also considering how the way we talk about innovation might change over time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now let's move on to specific factor error,
Okay.
which is a bit trickier.
Oh,
This type of error arises from the choices researchers make when they decide which words to include in their CATA dictionaries.
okay. So say we're measuring a company's risk appetite.
Right.
We can't just include words like gamble
Hmm.
and call it a day, right?
Wow.
What about phrases like strategic ventures
Yeah,
or exploring new markets?
exactly.
There's so many ways to talk about taking risks.
Absolutely. And that's where specific factor error can really trip us up.
Okay.
If we're not careful about choosing words that capture the full breadth of a concept,
Yeah.
we risk missing crucial information.
It's like having blind spots in our analysis.
It-
So it's almost more of a human error than a computer error.
You could say that.
We're the ones telling the computer what to look for.
Right.
And if our instructions are incomplete,
Yeah,
the results will be flawed.
exactly. That's a great point.
Okay.
And that human element is something to always be mindful of when working with CATA.
Yeah.
Even though it relies on these powerful algorithms,
Right.
the choices we make as researchers can heavily influence the outcome.
Okay. So we've covered transient error
Yep.
and specific factor error.
We have
What about that third type,
algorithm error.
algorithm error?
Yeah, is that where the computer itself introduces errors into the analysis?
That's right.
Okay, so algorithm error refers to the fact that different CATA software programs might process and count words slightly differently.
So two different programs analyzing the same text could potentially come up with different results.
Potentially, yes.
That seems like a recipe for confusion.
It can be, but thankfully, the research found that this type of error was less of a concern compared to transient and specific factor errors.
Okay, well, that's somewhat reassuring.
It is.
But still knowing that all three of these error types can creep into CAT analyses
Yeah,
makes you wonder just how much they impact the findings.
that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And to answer it, the researchers did something really interesting.
Okay.
They took a look back at past studies that used CATA
Hmm.
to see how these errors might have affected the results. And what they found was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah.
It turned out that in several cases, these errors
Mm-hmm.
led to a significant underestimation of the true relationships being studied.
So it's not just a matter of the results being slightly off.
No.
These errors can actually lead to completely wrong conclusions.
In some cases, yes.
Wow.
And that's why it's so crucial for researchers to be aware of these potential pitfalls and take steps to mitigate them.
Okay, so let's talk solutions. What can researchers do to make sure their CATA analyses are as accurate as possible?
Well, the good news is that the research offers some practical advice.
Okay, great.
For one, they emphasize the importance of careful dictionary creation
Okay.
and validation.
So that means going beyond simply listing synonyms.
Right.
And really thinking about all the different ways a concept might be expressed in language.
Exactly. So going back to our risk appetite example,
Yeah.
that might involve not just looking at individual words,
Okay.
but also phrases and even metaphors that companies use to convey their willingness to take risks.
And then testing those dictionaries against human judgment.
Right.
Have actual people read the text and identify instances of the concept you're trying to measure.
Exactly.
See if the computer's picking up on the same things.
Yeah, this helps to ensure that your dictionary is truly aligned with human understanding.
It sounds like there's a real interplay between human expertise and computational power in CATA.
There is.
We need both to get the most accurate and insightful results.
Absolutely, and that's a key takeaway for anyone using or interpreting data derived from CATA. It's not a magic bullet.
Right.
It's a tool that needs to be used thoughtfully and with an awareness of its limitations.
Okay, so we've talked about the problem, measurement error in CATA,
Yes.
and some potential solutions.
Right.
But why does all of this matter for our listeners?
Yeah.
Is this just an academic concern?
Not at all.
Okay.
CATA is being used more and more in the real world, not just in research.
So where are we seeing it pop up?
Well, companies are using it to understand customer sentiment from social media posts.
Okay.
Financial analysts are using it to predict market trends. And even political campaigns are using it to analyze speeches and gauge public opinion.
So basically, anywhere there's text, CATA can be applied.
Pretty much.
And that means the potential for measurement error is also widespread.
Precisely. That's why it's so important for everyone, not just researchers, to be aware of these issues.
Yeah.
We're all consumers of data these days.
Right.
And we need to be able to critically evaluate the information we're presented with.
We can't just blindly trust numbers anymore.
No.
We need to ask questions like, how are those numbers gathered?
Yeah.
What choices were made in the process?
Right.
And what potential biases might exist?
Exactly. It's like developing a healthy skepticism for the data that surrounds us.
Totally. Data literacy is becoming just as important as reading literacy these days.
It really is.
We need to be able to decode data and understand its limitations,
Right.
just like we decode words on a page.
Yeah.
And that's especially true for CATA, where even seemingly small decisions about which words to count can have a big impact on the results.
That's a great point. And it highlights the fact that even when we're using computers to analyze data, human judgment still plays a crucial role.
Right.
We're the ones framing the research questions, making choices about the data we collect, and ultimately interpreting the results.
So to wrap things up, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with from this deep dive into the world of CATA and measurement error?
I think the most important message is this.
Okay.
While CATA is a powerful tool, it's not a perfect one.
Right.
It's essential to be aware of the potential for error
Yeah.
and to take steps to mitigate those errors.
Okay.
But ultimately, the responsibility lies with us,
Right.
the users of this technology, to be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
to ask questions, and to remember that data is only as good as the decisions we make about how to collect, analyze, and interpret it.
That's a fantastic point to end on.
Thanks.
CATA can offer incredible insights,
It can.
but it's up to us to use it wisely and responsibly.
Absolutely.
And for our listeners who want to dive even deeper into this topic,
Yeah.
we've got links to the research we discussed
Mm-hmm.
and some additional resources on our website.
Check it out.
Be sure to check those out if you're feeling extra curious.
Yes.
Until next time, keep exploring. And remember, in the age of big data, it's not enough to just be data literate.
Right.
We need to be data critical.
We do.
Question the numbers.
Yeah.
Dig deeper.
Absolutely.
And always be on the lookout for those hidden biases.
Yeah, those hidden biases are everywhere.
They are.
It's really important to remember that the numbers can tell us a lot, but they don't always tell the whole story.
Right.
It's up to us to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And use our human judgment to make sense of the data.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of CATA and measurement error.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring.